So, hello everyone. So let's discuss animals in this video, raising animals for food. So meat production has gone up since 1950s. It has almost doubled. But if you guys remember from when we talked about the food chains, each time energy is transferred to the next level, 10% is being lost as heat. So feeding grain to cow and eating beef from a cow means that most of the grain's energy is lost to cow's metabolism. Which means if you're eating lower on the food chain, more vegetarian diet, it's more energy efficient and it reduces our ecological footprint. So in this picture, this graph, this is just showing you that the meat production has gone up compared to before to 2015, and eating lower on the food chain is more beneficial compared to eating meat. So when we choose what to eat, we're also choosing indirectly how to use resources such as land and water because our choices have consequences. Some animals, they convert grain feed into milk, meat, or eggs more efficiently than others. So if we're comparing chickens, they're using 2.8 kg of feed input compared to beef. They're using this much, 20 kg, which is a lot more. So based on these differences, there is a larger footprint of land area, water, and carbon dioxide per 1 kg of edible protein for each animal. So like I said, beef is the highest here to extract the largest footprint. And livestock, they release methane and nitrous oxide in their metabolism and waste. So it's also released from, those gases are also released from crops that are used to feed the animals and from fertilizers that are applied to these crops. So CO2 or carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere when the forests are cleared out for growing feed for the animals or when fossil fuels are burned down to grow feed or transport animals. So that's using a larger footprint and the emissions that are driving the climate change, those also increase. So and they're saying the footprint that animals are using, that we are using them, the ones that we're using for food, is larger than the transportation or automobiles, which is a lot. So beef is using the highest amount of land, it's using highest amount of water, it's releasing highest amount of greenhouse gases. So our food choices does have consequences depending on what we eat, what we consume. That's what drives the demand and the supply. So feedlots, um, they have benefits, they have some negative impacts as well. So they are these huge pens designed to provide high energy feed to animals that are living in high densities. Hopefully, you know what density means now is, they have small amount of space. There's lots of them there. So these are also known as factory farms or confined animal feeding operations. So they're more economy efficient and they have greater food production, which makes animal products affordable for more people. And concentrating cattle and other livestock in feedlots removes them from a rangeland. So that reduces the grazing impacts of these animals on larger areas in the landscape. But it also has some negative consequences. So feedlots, they can produce more intensive pollution due to release of highly concentrated waste. They produce, a lot of larger amount of manure and urine that are highly concentrated waste, and that can pollute surface water, groundwater, and the if it has a lot of nitrogen, the waste, if it has a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, that can also cause algae blooms, which is excess amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that causes the algae on top of the pond to grow, which cuts the oxygen supply for the organisms living inside the water. So that's not good either. So it also contains bacterial and viral pathogens that can sicken people, including Salmonella that you probably aware of, E. coli, Giardia. So these pathogens can cause diarrhea, botulism, and some parasitic infections. And the hormones they give them and antibiotics may be excreted in waste as well. So, the crowded conditions in which the animals are kept, they might need higher amount of antibiotics than to control the disease than under normal conditions where they're being raised outside in a traditional way. And then I as we talked about this, overuse of antibiotics can cause microbes to evolve resistant to the antibiotics, just like pests can evolve resistant to pesticides. That makes the drugs less effective, leading the feedlot managers to increase dosages, and that increases the use of antibiotics. And hormones that are released to livestock, and um, these are also excreted in waste, and they can end up in wastewater, and they can be transferred up the food chain in downstream ecosystems. And some of the chemicals that remain in the livestock, they can be transferred to people when we eat the meat. Um, the FDA, they try to minimize the health and environmental impacts, but the efforts are limited. So, manure from the feedlots can be applied to farms as a fertilizer, reducing the need for chemical fertilizers, but over application can pollute the soil and the water supplies. So, not all livestock is raised on um, modern farms. Some of them are raised in intensive facilities like this. Maybe when you go to the store, you probably saw some eggs that says free range animals. So those are not in confined pens, and it might have a USDA certification on it or a stamp on it, so that this kind of certifies that this is free range. It just means that the birds were given access to the outdoors, but that can be costlier than raising them in feedlots. Therefore, those eggs might be more expensive compared to the ones that were not free range. Okay, so lab-grown meat. This is called cultured meat. It's genetically identical to animal meat, but without the environmental impacts. So this could reduce the ecological footprint of high-impact foods like beef. So they use these in vitro tissue culture that they can use to cultivate lab-grown meat. And this is this could be potentially healthier than to eat animal meat. So they did grow their first hamburger patty in 2013. They do have the technology for producing lab-grown meat on large scale as well, where the cost can come down. And as the technology is improving, the costs are coming down. So, but they're not sure if people would even consume the lab-grown meat. So, right now it's not available commercially. And then we have aquaculture. That's aqua means water. So that's applying to the water animals. So the cultivation of aquatic organisms in a controlled environment is called aquaculture. And they're doing this with lots of animals, lots of freshwater and marine species. That includes, fish, mollusks, clams, seaweed. So many aquatic species are raised in open water, floating net pens like that. And then some are raised in ponds. So by doing this, they can get more production. So tenfold it has increased tenfold in the past 30 years. Um, and it can be sustainable on a smaller scale. And on the larger scale, the industrial agriculture may be um, requiring an overuse of antibiotics that can destroy coastal systems. and spread disease in invasive species, especially if the farmed animal or organism escapes the area and goes into the surrounding ecosystem. So as with feedlots animals, commercially farmed fish are also fed with grain, which is energy inefficient, and they can reduce food supplies for people. The farmed fish also sometimes fed fish meal made from wild ocean fish such as herring, and when they do that, it puts additional stress on the wild populations. So for these reasons, industrial aquaculture can leave a larger footprint. So it does increase the food supply, but it also has some negative impacts where it leaves um, a larger footprint, ecological footprint, and it also helps to reduce overfishing, so a positive and a negative.